joining us this afternoon. Sorry, at the Planning Committee. And the first item on our agenda, any apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair.
That's okay. Item 2, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Are there any? No. No hands. Thank you. Item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meetings as the correct record. And we have 2 sets there on page 1 and 2. That's the first set. And then the next was starting on the page, that was the meeting on the 6th of July, page 3, 4, page 5 and page 6. Would somebody move them into true record?
Yeah.
Yes. Second.
Cheers, thank you. So then item 4 is the next item. Any items for deferral or withdrawal?
Not at this stage, Chair.
No. Thank you. And so then we move on to item 5, which is the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item on our agenda there, you can see on page 11, item 1, is the land west of Reader Pandy Road. Andrew, that's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Ian's going to run through the presentation on this. If we can just start off with the site location, please, Ian. This application is for the construction of a greener grid park comprising energy storage and grid balancing equipment, including the change of use from agriculture and grazing land, along with associated infrastructure. And the application is to be considered at committee as the site area exceeds 2 hectares. So the application site comprises of an area of land predominantly to the northeast of the Swansea North substation and gas compressor station in Velindre. The site itself is an agricultural field and is outlined in red on the plan in front of you, with the blue land within the applicant's control. The access route would utilise the existing access road from the B4489 and run to the south of the substations. Just for your bearings, the blue line along the bottom is the M4 with access provided at junction 46. So the proposal, as I said, is for energy storage and grid balancing. And will comprise 12 battery storage containers, 6 inverters, 2 transformers, an energy management system building, a 10-metre high firewall and other infrastructure. If you could go to the next slide, please, Ian. This is an aerial view of the site with the site indicated by the red arrow. So the site itself is an agricultural field, but note the existing energy apparatus in the area to the west and the southwest. And Velindre Business Park is located in the southwest corner as well, as you can see there. If you can go on to the site photos, please, Ian. Sorry, the next one is just a slightly closer view of the actual site, which is, as I said, in the next to the gas compressor station in the top right. Top right is, sorry, can you go to the photos, please, Ian? We've looked at that. Thank you. Sorry. The top left is the gas compressor station viewed from the rear, looking south to show the scale of the buildings already on site. The top right is the existing access onto the B4489. So you can see it's a nice wide access that would serve the development. And the bottom photo is a view across the site back towards the gas compressor station. And just note the electricity pylons in the background. If you can go on to the layout, please, Ian. So this is the overall site layout. What you'll notice on there is that the access utilises the existing access. The yellow hatched line is the access for the Abergelli Power Project, which is a gas-fired power station granted development consent order. So the access for this site doesn't join that, it joins it later on, basically. So you can see the grey line where the red dotted line stops and goes into the grey line, that is the access. So this plan gives a brief overview of all the works, and then the next plan goes into the layout of the greener grid compound. Thank you. So again, the axis comes in from the south, and the site itself measures approximately 100 metres by 109 metres. The inverters and the batteries are located to the northeast of the road in the red and green respectively. And the orange is the energy management system enclosed in a 10-metre high building with the transformers in blue on the left side of this. And there is an internal road running around in a loop with various ancillary buildings, apparatus around, and there will be very minor cut and fill. So on the top right hand side of the screen, you'll see the red hatching. That is some cut, and on the bottom side, on the left hand side of the substation, you've got green hatching. That is a bit of fill. So we have got a condition on there with regards to levels. If you can go to the elevations, please, next, Ian. So the top elevation is a view looking north with the transformers on the left hand side, the energy storage building in the centre, and the rest is the batteries and inverters, which would be behind the fencing. The middle is a view looking east with the transformers in the foreground and the building in the background. And the bottom is the opposite side view with the building in the foreground, and then you've got the transformers over the top. The site would be enclosed in 3.4 metre high fencing as well. In terms of consultation responses, we've had no neighbour comments received to date, but an objection was submitted on behalf of Abergelli Power Limited by Drax, who are the company who own APL, who've been granted the development consent order for the nearby gas-fired power station in September 2019. Those comments are addressed fully in the report. In terms of consultees, obviously there's a lot of consultation that's been carried out on this, and there have been no objections from any consultees, including the local highways authority, NRW, Ecology, the tree officer, or Welsh Water, subject to conditions. From a policy perspective, the site is located in the countryside, but is in an area that has already significant energy infrastructure, which detracts from its setting, with a gas-fired power station consented on the opposite side. The applicant has provided justification and detailed their analysis of other sites in the application, which are accepted, and it is considered to be necessary infrastructure which is allowed in the open countryside under policy CV2. The proposal is for an electricity storage and distribution facility, which is designed to balance electricity demand and supply in order to prevent shortages and blackouts as a result of the intermittent nature of renewable energy that feed into the national grid, and the support at national level in Future Wales and Planning Policy Wales. Within the setting I've described, the visual impact is considered acceptable. One of the key issues on this is the highways impact and cumulative impact of construction management and construction transport in association with Abergelli Power. But we consider this can be effectively controlled via a condition for the detailed construction traffic management plan, which is included in condition 7 of the officer's report. And NRW have requested a KEMP, which again, so that's a construction environment management plan, which would be secured by condition along with other ecological mitigation. We've also got conditions for historic environment mitigation and protection of the water main, and there's considered to be no impact on neighbours, subject to a condition regarding noise. So the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. And first, before we enter any debate, we've got two speakers who are the agents for the application. We have Guy Nicholson Statcraft and Naomi Aikalu Arcus. So you saw one of us with us. Anyway, you've got your opportunity to address the committee now with 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting Statcraft to address the meeting. I'm Guy Nicholson, a Chartered Electrical Engineer, Head of Grid Integration at Statcraft UK, with 30 years experience connecting renewable energy projects to grids. Statcraft is owned by the Norwegian government and is the largest renewable energy generator in Europe, with hydro, wind and battery assets. In Wales, Statcraft owns Rheidol Power Station and Wallace Wind Farm, and Statcraft's investing £600 million in the UK over 5 years, up to 2025. The planning proposal by Statcraft at Swansea is for a green grid park housing energy management infrastructure and battery energy storage system, and it's deliberately sited close to the Swansea North National Grid 400 kV transmission substation. This is very important as the Swansea North substation is unique. South Wales, it's the only location with 4 by 400 kV double circuit lines converging, making it an extremely strong point on the grid and ideal for delivering services to National Grid to maintain grid stability. We also note that Abergele Power Project has planning permission nearby, and we've committed to cooperate with APP to minimise the environmental impacts of our shared access. So what's the purpose of the Greener Grid Park in this application? Integrating renewable energy into the grid is a growing challenge as the volume of renewables increases and as old power stations close. On Easter Monday last year, National Grid had sufficient renewable energy to supply demand of the entire grid, but it needed to turn on 17 fossil power stations to keep the grid stable. This was extremely costly and carbon inefficient, as renewables had to be turned off to make space for this fossil generation. So National Grid is looking for new ways of stabilising the grid without burning fossil fuels. In January last year, Statkraft won 4 contracts with National Grid to provide grid stability services without burning fossil fuels. This tender from National Grid will save electricity consumers £128 million, up to £128 million. Statkraft projects are now under construction, with Keith in Scotland due to commission in the autumn. We're preparing our Greener Grid Park at Swansea for a similar tender by National Grid called Stability Pathfinder Phase 3, which will enable greater and faster decarbonisation of our energy supplies, and so help meet Welsh and UK net zero carbon targets and also address the global climate crisis. I'll hand over to Naomi.
Thank you, Guy. Hello, I'm Naomi Hakelo, a chartered planner with Arcus Consultancy Services and the agent for this application. As mentioned by the applicant, there is a national and local need for this type of essential infrastructure. This site is adjacent to the existing substation, which will prevent the need for lengthy transmission cables and enable efficient transmission to and from the national grid. The Greener Grid Park will incorporate comprehensive landscape and biodiversity enhancements, including over 1 hectare of native species woodland, as well as grassland, wildflowers, scrub, and hedges. The landscape and biodiversity enhancements will minimize the impact on the local landscape and deliver a significant net biodiversity gain of 45% compared with the existing situation. The applicant has engaged extensively with the council and consultees and taken their comments into account during the preparation of this planning application. Detailed environmental and technical assessments have been submitted with the application, and the development will not have any unacceptable effects on the environment or residential amenity, as confirmed in the planning officer's report. The development, if consented, will be regulated by detailed planning conditions regarding the construction and operation of the facility. No objections have been received from local residents, and there are no outstanding objections from technical or statutory consultees, further demonstrating that this is an appropriate site for the Greener Grid Park. Finally, this development is required to facilitate the efficient use of renewable energy and help to reduce Swansea's carbon footprint in light of the climate emergency, which Swansea Council declared in 2019. The application will contribute to meeting the net zero emissions commitments for Wales and the UK. Planning Policy Wales encourages the development of energy storage and other flexibility services in order to reinforce the grid and minimise the need for new generation, while Swansea LDP Policy EU1 supports proposals for renewable and low-carbon energy infrastructure. The Greener Grid Park is therefore directly supported by local and national planning policy, as highlighted in the Planning Officer's report. We therefore respectfully request that consent is granted. Thank you.
Thank you both. And we've got no hands going up. Anyone wish to speak? I got 2. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You mentioned our carbon footprint there. It states in the record here a building with a 20-metre vent stack. Can you tell me what emissions are coming out there, and do they fall below our guidelines?
perhaps we come back to them all together, shall we, in a minute? Councillor Jones, Mary Jones.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question. How long do they envisage that this is going to take to build? I'm thinking of the disruption and obviously the complaint from Abergelli. So perhaps I can have an idea of the terminal, of the actual build, and then when will it be active?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Councillor White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the report to Public Rights of Way, Chair, page 35, in regards to 117, L117, new footpaths or improvement to footpaths. If the footpaths obviously in question are going to be damaged by a heavy plant, clearly there's a need for that to be sorted out before the things can be taken on site. And secondly, in regards to condition 14 on page 63, the request for a permanent crossing is within stated within a 106. I noticed there's no sort of figure mentioned in regards to this amount within for a new footpath. Could I have clarification on that, please? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. My last speaker was Councillor Des Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst the overall 600 and something million investment in the UK is impressive, how many permanent jobs will this particular application bring to this area?
Okay. Right. Thank you. No other hands up. Andrew, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Anderson referred to a 20-metre vent and any emissions. There's no vent as part of this application. There's nothing on site there, so I'm not sure where that's come from in the report. Myself, sorry, if you can refer me specifically to it, I'll have a look at it because it might be something I've missed. But I'll come back to that if it's okay. Thank you. In terms of the time taken to build, the applicant has obviously prepared a transport statement for the application, whereby they indicate the construction period is going to last for 43 weeks. So as I said, it's going to be under a year. They've given an overall estimate from the time of lead in to, appointing contractors for an overall 18-month period, but that's not just the build phase. That's everything involved. So that's what they've indicated in that respect. In terms of Councillor White's comments on the public rights of way, so the access track covers 2 public rights of way currently. One is the existing route that's already crossed by the access for the existing gas compressor station and substation network, so there's no change there, but the condition attached requires details of the public right-of-way crossing to be submitted to and agreed with the local planning authority. So there's no section 106 with that. The condition requires the scheme to be implemented as approved prior to the first beneficial use of the development. So that will be at the applicant's own cost. The authority have gone through and looked at the proposal in terms of the SIL regulations and don't consider that effectively don't consider that a section 106 can be or is necessary for this development. In terms of Councillor Thomas's query on jobs, in the application, the applicant indicates that there's circa 77 full-time equivalent jobs during the peak construction period. In terms of jobs during operation, you'll note that this facility would be operated remotely. So there are 11 full-time equivalent jobs, but those are remote jobs, so it's not necessarily going to be jobs in the local area. Those are the queries. As I said, I'm happy to come back to Councillor Anderson, as I said, if I've missed anything.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. It's on page 12, and it says a gas turbine compressor and associated housing buildings, a 20-metre vent stack, and auxiliary buildings and pipework. And on your slide, it's actually got in the centre one, it's got a stack going above the building height.
Okay. So there's no stack proposed. There's a 20-metre high stack referenced in the site history, which includes the land at the side, which includes the compressor stations and the National Grid compressor station. So that is referred to in the site history for the National Grid site. So that's not part of this application. Sorry, councillor.
No, you've clarified what. Thank you anyway. Cheers.
Thank you.
Application back in 2006. Yeah. Right. No other hands up? No. Okay. Well, you can see, members, the recommendation there on page 58 is one of approval. We will now, as in normal fashion, names will be called and recorded either for, against, or abstain.
Okay, Councillor Cyril Anderson.
For.
Councillor Peter Black. Councillor Peter Black.
Sorry, for.
For.
Councillor Phil Dutton.
For.
Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Mary Jones.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Richard Lewis.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Des Thomas.
For.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Mike White.
For.
Chair.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next item now. Item 2, you see on page 67 is Felling Wen Farm. And that's back to you again, Andrew, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, we're going to do a presentation on this. As I said, if you go to the next screen, please, Ian, we're in very close proximity to where we just were, and the application site is actually on the left-hand side of the screen, just to the west as you're looking at it of the application site. So this application is being reported to committee as the site area exceeds 2 hectares. The application site is indicated in red, located off Rhyd y Pandy Road in Velindre, and permission has previously been granted for a 9-megawatt solar farm at committee back in August last year. So the previous site is located to the west of the site for the context, and the site is just to the north of Morrison Hospital. So again, note the electricity lines running overhead on this site because they are integral to the application. So the application seeks permission for alterations to the internal access road and is retrospective in nature. So if you can just do a quick go to the next slide, please, Ian. This is just to provide some views across the site. These are both from Rhyd y Pandy Road, the top and the bottom one, over the existing boundary hedge extending into the fields beyond, with the overhead lines clearly visible. If you can go to the next one, please, Ian. So what the application proposed, this is the proposed site layout of the panels and elevation in the bottom left-hand corner. And the overhead lines are indicated on orange, brown dotted lines with the circle denoting the pylon in the centre itself. So what the application proposes, as I said, there were, as part of the previous application, there were existing gaps in the hedges, which was going to provide access to the various solar panels. But the applicant has been in discussion with National Grid, who have said for safety reasons, they have reviewed the proposals and have health and safety concerns with people utilising an access track running below the 400 kilovolt national infrastructure overhead. So what they've said that it should be avoided. So what the applicant is proposing is to puncture new holes through the hedges and then fill up the existing gaps. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Ian. What you've got on this one is a close-up of the revised route. So you can see the existing gaps underneath the dotted lines. So that's where the original access points were. This proposal proposes a new access route avoiding those. So those existing gaps will be filled. And the overall increase in hedge, we're losing 22.4 metres of linear hedge, and that will be replaced with 23.2 metres planted. So basically, there will also be a reduction in the overall length of tracks. The transplanted hedgerow sections will be checked and monitored, and any parts of these hedgerows that are not thriving will be replaced by native species in line with the details contained in the approved landscape management plan. So in terms of the application, we haven't had any objections. Obviously, the previous grant of consent has established the principle of the development, and new hedgerow will be planted in lieu of the hedgerow to be lost. So we have consulted with the tree officer. Tree officer has visited the site, and as I said, they are happy with the management plan. So there'd be no objections, subject to a condition requiring the works to be undertaken in accordance with the method statement. Just to let members know, on the update sheet, there are 2 amendments noted to conditions 10 and 16. So as I said, the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions and the amendments noted in the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Member wish to speak? No? Sure. Okay, well, you see the recommendation again on page 86 is one of approval, but again, we will now proceed to vote.
Okay, Councillor Cyril Anderson,
For.
Councillor Peter Black,
For.
Councillor Phil Downing,
For.
Councillor Will Evans,
For.
Councillor Mary Jones,
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis,
For.
Councillor Richard Lewis. Councillor Richard Lewis.
Sleep. For, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Paulette Smith. Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Des Thomas.
For.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd. Yeah. Councillor Mike White.
For.
And Chair.
Yeah, full.
Okay, that's approved unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so then we move on to item 3 on page 91, which is Ysgol Gowyn Gower in Gowerton. And over to Chris. Chris Healy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this application relates to Gower Comprehensive School in Gowerton. Members may recall that planning permission was granted back in May 2019 for the construction of a 2-storey detached education block, artificial playing pitches, the new access road, and a 16-space car park with some other ancillary buildings. The application before you today is a Section 73 application, which mainly seeks to vary the plan's condition of the 2019 permission, as the design and appearance of the originally proposed building has evolved since it was first granted permission. There are some other changes to the external appearance of the building. Details of the boundary treatments of the development are also provided as part of this application. That's referenced as condition 10 in the report. Page 100 of the report sets out the changes in follow. I won't go through them now because there's quite a few of them, but they are there if anyone wants to quickly read through them. The proposed development is substantially completed, and if the first slide that Ian's got there on the screen, that shows the elevations of the building as originally proposed and approved by us back in 2019. The next slide, you can move to that, Ian, shows the layout of the scheme again as originally proposed. So you can see the proposed extension block, which is in the blue and green. The 3 pitch areas are laid out slightly to the north, and you can see the originally proposed access and car parking area in the grey. So moving on to the alterations, Ian, the elevations are largely the same as what we previously approved. The footprint of the building is very, very similar to what was previously approved, as is the siting of the building. The proposed building is now slightly higher, and you can see the materials which are listed there on the right. You may find them a bit difficult to read, but they are a combination of trespa cladding, render and brickwork. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ian. That's a 3D image of the building, which, as I say, is very kind of similar to what we've previously approved. And I think the other details I've submitted on the which are included within the slides are details of the bin stores and the tank enclosure. So as you can see there, the layout is very, very similar. So there have not been any objections from any of the consultees. There have not been any objections from any of the local residents. So in summary, we think the proposed changes are largely inconsequential. We therefore recommend approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any member wish to speak? Councillor Thomas?
Only one comment. I think the applicant, Mrs. B. Rolls, would be impressed. Brian Rolls.
Yes. Yeah. Not past me by now, I can see it, yes. Yeah. Don't tell him. That's another typo we missed, yeah. Sorry. Any other member wish to speak? No? All right, again, you can see the recommendation on page 106 is one to approve. Again, you vote now.
Councillor Cyril Anderson.
4.
Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Councillor Phil Downing.
4.
Councillor Will Evans.
4.
Councillor Mary Jones.
4.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Councillor Richard Lewis.
4, Chairman.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
4.
Councillor Des Thomas.
4.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Mike White.
4.
And Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we move on to item 4, which is on page 111, and that's Eastmore on Klein Common. And Liam, that's yours, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll take members through this one. Just wait for the presentation. Okay, starting first with updates. There's no real changes to the report or new information, although it has been brought to our attention. The report does contain some planning history references related to the adjoining site. That also is referring to Eastmore. So those applications, they've automatically been generated from a computer system. They've been embedded in the report. I think it's because of the proximity, the red line to both sites. So effectively, the only planning history that's relevant to this application is that from 2015. So it's on page 111 of your report. So just want to make that clear, really, before we go into the item. So dealing with the site's roughly triangular in shape. Parcel of land, it's set out there on the site location plan. It's currently occupied by a dwelling, Eastmore House. Access to the site is off Westland Avenue. You can just see it there on the south, the red line as it kicks down. Although there also appears to be a historic access to the north off Males Road. So in terms of the site, the area, it's characterised by some high-density two-storey dormer bungalows, two-storey dwellings and some single-storey bungalows in the area with no definitive architectural style. We just cycle through the images there, and we can see the context. So you have the property there, it's set behind existing dwellings, and then you can see the two forms of access. There was one at the north, I think, going to the site adjacent, which was also called Eastmore. I think there was a property there previously, and then that property has been approved for redevelopment. But if you look to the south where the hand pointer is, you can see that's the access that's indicated on the drawings there. So if we just cycle through, there's a closer up image as well. As you can see the context, the relationship of that existing dwelling with this front then looking at the backs of those properties, those two-storey properties there off Westland Avenue. And we'll cycle through a few more images. So there's a view from the rear, just showing the context there, site adjoining, and the shape of the site there. And another Google image there showing the makeup of it. So there's a bit of a hard stand in front of the dwelling. The rest of it's a bit overgrown there. Some mature trees around the boundary. There's a few images. That's the site access we're referring to. So the two pillars, and then you've got the fence in there, gate access off Westland Avenue. There's just a few images then the officers taken from within the site just to show the space involved. So in terms of planning history, you'll see in your report that permission was granted in 2015 for the construction of 4 dwellings in outline also. And during that application, there were a number of objections to the scheme. It was considered by planning committee at the time, when the decision was made with an outcome of approval. So one of the objections at the time centred around concerns that the width of the access to achieve highway standards was not appropriate, and concerns are raised by residents in that particular application on the basis that the on-site access did not equate to the access shown on the proposed plans, and that the on-site access was actually narrower. I understand there wasn't party to it, but I think there was a member site visit in 2015 before a decision was made, and the access was measured at the access point. In terms of the width of it at the front as being 3.87 metres in width. However, the plans provided the applicant at the time showed the access of 4.5 metres would be achieved. So members were informed that if the applicant did not own the land in question as shown on the application drawings, they may not be able to show adequate means of access into the site for future reserve matters applications. So it would mean that if they can't show that, they can't develop the site. However, members were informed that we must consider the drawings on the face value as they come in before us, and the issue of the width of the access was queried in that application before a decision was made. The applicant had signed certificate A, so to confirm that the application was valid and the ownership was within there. So in terms of the application before us, effectively it's the same site involving very much the same issues as before. It's an outline scheme with all matters reserved. This particular scheme first came in 2019, proposing 5 dwellings. So there were objections to the application when they came in, call-in request at the time, and further information was requested from the case officer. It resulted in a BAT survey being carried out in September 2020, amendment to the application then to reduce the number of dwellings down to 4. That came in October 2020. And then there was some further ecology work received earlier this year, as well as some revision to the plans to show the access to the site can be achieved. So in terms of the scheme itself, if we go on to the next slide with the layout drawing there on the next couple, there you go. All matters are reserved for future consideration. The plan there indicates 4 dwellings to replace the existing dwelling at the site. Scale parameters have been provided as set out in your report. So the width property has been 6 metres minimum, 12 metre maximum, depth 10.5 to 12 metres, height 8 metres to 9.5 metre maximum. So matters pertaining to the detail of the scheme would be reserved for future consideration. So essentially we've been asked the question here, is the principle of development acceptable? So as mentioned, the site has history with approval for 4 dwellings. There's been no significant change in planning policy in terms of the land use allocation for the site. So there's no reason why the principle of development is not acceptable again. As mentioned in the report, design would be considered at a future date, albeit that the indicated plans show that there is appropriate space there for the dwellings to be designed in such a manner that it wouldn't appear cramped or contrived. It's not considered the dwellings would give rise to potential harm in terms of overlooking or overbearing or resulting in overshadowing impacts, but again, those details would be considered fully at reserve matter stage. In terms of ecology and trees, ecology surveys revealed no bats at the property and suggested the retention of boundary hedgerows. The tree survey and tree protection plan was provided as part of the application, demonstrating that all but one of the existing trees will be retained. So you can see them plotted there on the site plan. So there's no objections from the tree officer. In terms of highway safety, as set out in the report, there were public objections received about the access width. Highway authorities considered the application and raised no objection on the basis that the access is set out and retained at a minimum of 4.5 metres along its entire length. So, subject to this condition being imposed, it's condition 11 in your pack, then there is no highway safety objection to the principle of the development of the site. Any dispute over land ownership in terms of the site circumstances is not for consideration through a planning application. So we have explored this issue both in 2015 and as part of this application. We've asked the agent, the applicant, for a response in terms of the concerns about land ownership, and their response to us was that the access to the site from Westlands Avenue has been referred to on many occasions in this and past applications. Position is that the property Eastmore House was the first property built in the area, and the pillars at the entrance belong to the title of Eastmore. And the red line shown on the drawing is the extent of the land in that title. The topographical survey may show fences that have been positioned by third parties inside the red line. The red line is what our clients own and will be using to access the development. So I've got a few more slides where I tried to plot that on in terms of what the situation is as far as I see it. So you have an extract there, which is the topographical survey provided as part of the application. So you can see the setup in terms of you've got your access pillars either side of the access. And if you were to measure from within the pillar, from pillar to pillar, it measures as 3.877 meters. So if we were to go to the site and you took a measurement, that's the measurement that would come up, 3.87 meters. And then further in the site, the measurement that I've taken off the plan is 4.06 or thereabouts. So there's 2 4-meter measurements within the site. So that's the site situation on the site as far as fences are. If we go to the next slide, this shows the application drawings and the red line that supports the planning application. And you'll see it's annotated there that the pillars are to be removed, the fence and the wall adjusted to create a 4.5 meter wide access. And you can see it's plotted on the plan. The 4.5 meters is to be maintained within that access then affected to the dwellings. So if you go to the next slide, what I've done is just sort of further highlighted that. So you can see the measurement comes up at, off the drawing anyway, 4.785 right at the southern part of the access, and then as you go in it's 4.5, 0.59, and then further in is 6.1 meters where you've got that little nib which sort of extends out further. So, and on the next drawing I've tried to, well, next image then, I've just tried to visualize that. So if you were to knock down the pillars, your width is 4.78 meters. Behind that, then I understand there's fencing. The applicant has shown us on the red line plan that it can be achieved at 4.5 meters within the site. So we are satisfied with that, and a condition to that effect to ensure that that is the situation on the reserve matters and when they develop the site. So our recommendation is of approval as per the conditions in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And next speaker is Denise Masters. You with us? Yeah, sorry, Maria.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, thank you. You've got 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you very much when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon all. I am Denise Masters, resident of Eastmore Park Crescent, speaking on behalf of other objectors. In view of time constraints, I'm going to begin with 2 purely rhetorical questions, but nonetheless important. What is the purpose of public consultation on a planning application, if the valid concerns of those invited to comment are to be dismissed. May I also ask, what purpose do planning regulations serve if they can be ignored? During the past 6 years, the applicant has submitted 2 proposals and various amendments for the development of this plot. In our opinion, they all breach the guidelines for development in terms of density and style of housing. And of course, I refer you here to the infill and backland design guide. Each of the applications has attracted criticism from a majority of residents in the vicinity. There are 63 objections registered against the current application, all referencing public safety. The principal objection has repeatedly been against the proposed access, and that has already been discussed this afternoon. Contrary to claims, this is not an historic access to the site. You will have seen from a photograph, it is a narrow driveway, never before used as a vehicular access. And I must repeat that. This has never been used as a vehicular access. The entry is in an area of densely populated housing with no clear line of vision for exiting drivers and insufficient turning space for those accessing the development from the roadway in Eastmoor Park Crescent and Westlands Avenue. The access is a particular issue for any vehicle used by HGV drivers, refuse collection and emergency services. Any such vehicle, in our opinion, will be unable to enter the site in a single manoeuvre using a forward gear. Imagine the disruption. The required minimum width of 4.5 metres throughout cannot be guaranteed by the applicant because the boundaries claimed in the submission have not been legally determined. The viable alternative is an established and safe access to the plot across Klein Common in use for more than 50 years, and you have seen that on the photographs. This option, however, has been excluded from any plans submitted by the applicant, and at no point has an attempt been made to modify the plans for access despite the recorded objections. The applicant continues to demonstrate a blatant disregard for community opinion, impact on the local environment, road users and pedestrians. This proposal is predicated on the use of an impractical and hazardous access. Is the planning committee prepared to approve the plans compromise public safety? I thank you for your attention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. First is one of our ward members with us, anyway. Councillor Des Thomas, did you want to speak? Yes?
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, it's called to the committee by myself because of the amount of public concern in the area, as you can understand. This dwelling, as has been said, has always had access via Klein Common. If members are aware, if you go up Klein Road, if you come to the end of the housing and start to go across the common, there is a track on your left-hand side, and that has traditionally been the access to this site. If this access was continued to be used, I think the problem would go away. Also, you've heard reference at the beginning of this item of the adjoining site, which has planning permission and access and egress onto Chestnut Avenue. If the two sites were joined together, as I said at the previous time we discussed this, that would alleviate the problem, because there would be the larger site and access would be off Chestnut Avenue, and the problem would go away. But that isn't the case that we're dealing with today. We have before us this application for 4 properties. Generally, I don't think there is any objection to the properties themselves. It's all about the access. The applicant claims that they can achieve 4.5 meters for egress and access. The residents live in both sides of the access drive there. The narrow lane claim that they own the property. They own parts of the pillars that has been shown, and I thank Liam for the report. It's been quite clear of what we're dealing with. But so it's down to, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a civil case between who owns what. I'm glad to see that condition associated with the application is that the 4.5 meter has to be provided along its entire length, and that's important. The other thing is the minimum width for the where you come out onto the pavement for safety reason needs to be 6.5 meters. Now, this will include the taking of some of the highways land, which is currently as a grass verge. A question raises then is, are the highways department liable for an income from the use of this land? Does it form part of what we used to know as the old ransom strip? Is there an equation where part of the value of the site is carried forward to the value of these pieces of land, which is necessary? The other, and if I could mention one other thing, there's a lighting strategy I noticed mentioned, and it's very rare we see lighting strategies mentioned. It drew my attention because I'm currently dealing with another issue in West Cross where we've got a semi-detached property with 13 exterior lights, and with the lighting problems with that is fairly obvious. So an answer on the lighting strategy would be useful, please. But as I said, I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to a civil matter, who owns what. If the applicant cannot provide the 4.5 meters, then I cannot see how they can proceed with this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mary Jones.
Sorry, I went off then. I think along with Councillor Thomas and probably yourself, Chair, we visited this site, and yes, we were there while it was being measured. My question really is, and I know Councillor Thomas has sort of indicated about the old access, but you say it's got to be 4.5. I presume that's so 2 vehicles can pass, but there obviously is no footway at all going to be along here. And yet we're talking about it coming out onto a footway further down, which obviously all drives do. But I'm just wondering how we're going to proceed if, as you said, I think Councillor Thomas says a civil matter, but are we actually going to keep checking that they are going to abide by the 4.5, or will they actually build it and then hope for the best? So who is going to be keeping an eye on it, and how will they? It's quite dangerous. I know it's only 4 houses, but still it's quite dangerous to have no footway at all.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in regards to highways, I can't understand how highways, seeing the way the entrance is, clearly, signage should have really been considered about a concealed entrance, because, as I say, they're driving out onto a public highway, and I've got serious concerns about the safety of pedestrians. when I sort of coming out onto the public highway. But I just wondered if the highways could clarify why wasn't that taken into consideration about possibly of signage put in place regarding that it was a concealed entrance. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, hopefully get an answer for that. Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd.
Yes. For many years, I attended regularly every winter Eastmore to attend church courses, and we always went in from the common. I can't understand all this discussion because I would have thought that that would have been the obvious way into this site. And I would have thought that if that was still going on, I mean, we did it, there were many of us, you know, there were up to 30 people going in a week on a weekday night, and there was never a problem. So I can't understand why you're now causing aggravation and problems to the people living in the area by not continuing with that approach. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This revolves around the access. As far as the other access is concerned, referring to another application in my own ward, where we said there's a better access to this, and we were told by the planners, this is the application in front of us, and this is what we got to determine. So I think the determination is either this access is suitable or it isn't. And I think clause 11 covers, I would say, the residents on that, because if they are right, then this development will never take off, providing we are on the ball. And the people who look after that are the local members and the local people, because you see any development, what's going on every day. And if other people own the pillars, well, like Des has said, that's a civil matter. And, you know, the development will be on stop straight away once they put that in motion. So I think once the 4.5 meters all the way down, and I think, well, we sort of, the developers have done what they're supposed to do. But if the residents are right, they'll never get 4.5 meters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On a similar vein, I mean, obviously the access is critical. It'd be interesting to know from the legal officer where we stand in relation to this being sorted at a future occasion. I mean, if for instance we approve this today, how can we guarantee that that is going to be of the required width? I mean, it's impossible, and to me, it hinges on either we get satisfactory evidence that that is in fact 4.5 meters for the whole entire length, or not. Otherwise, I can't see, I wouldn't approve it myself. So in relation to the access point, be interesting to hear from the highway officer today what their view is on it. The other thing, which is Councillor Phil Downing has mentioned, obviously I agree with him that this is nothing we can consider today, the access from the common, but it is a mystery why we haven't considered it, because there's nothing in the report to say why it's been discarded. You know, I don't know the area, so is that common land, for instance? Would there be an application needed to get it from the commoners and all these sorts of issues? But it's not today for us to decide that, but it is complicated, isn't it? So in relation to the site itself, the periphery has got mature trees on it. The tree officer in the report has asked that TPOs be put in as a condition. Can you confirm that that is the case? I know there's a tree report, but is it a tree TPO for all the existing trees in existence? If not, is it covered by condition? So that's all at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Got no other hands up to speak, so perhaps Jonathan, sorry, yes, thanks. And then we will come back perhaps for Liam and Highways. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I just, in response to Councillor Evans, condition 11 on the report states that it is a pre-commencement condition for the 4.5 metre width. So as this is pre-commencement, this would have to be achieved before the development could commence. So thank you, Chair.
Right, there are clears up a few questions then. And then Liam across highways, have we got any responses? Oh, Councillor Black, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, just in relation to that legal advice, if this is a pre-commencement condition, does that mean that they have to discharge the condition formally before they can commence building, as they would do if, for example, if we require them to produce a travel plan or something like that?
Can we get an answer to that straight away then?
Yes, Councillor, that is correct. Yeah, it would have to be discharged
formally through a planning process.
For an application, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just come in, Chair, and clarify. This is an outline application, so a further reserve matters application would need to be submitted if it was approved today, and that would include details of the access as part of the process.
Yeah, thank you. Right, okay. Liam, Highways, do you want to come back with anything?
Yeah, I've covered a few points now. Yeah, I was just going to cover what Ian mentioned, really. I mean, this is an outline application with all matters reserved for future consideration. The fact is, the applicant has indicated that that will be the access. So we have conditioned along the lines of the Highway Authority response in that prior to commencing development, the means of access should be constructed and completed in accordance with the approved plans. So effectively, it has to be done before they can build the houses. And you know, if there was a complaint, we could go and check that that access was as it should be, and they could not commence further until that was essentially agreed. In terms of the point raised by Councillor Thomas on the lighting strategy, yes, I mean it's not a normal requirement on every planning application, but in this instance, an ecology survey has been put in. There was comments in that suggesting a lighting strategy during the construction and later phase. So it's essentially the shift in terms of policy at the moment in terms of ecological enhancements and improvements. So the reason for it is more related to ecology and wildlife in terms of bats and protection of bats as opposed to any other lighting impact, because often lighting itself doesn't need planning permission, you know, in certain instances. So really it's to cover the ecology side of it. Yeah, I mean, we talked about highways. I don't know if the highway officer is able to expand any further on the highway comments on the application, but we've obviously been dealing with it in terms of the planning side of it and recommended as per the Highway Authority response.
Yeah, I picked it up in. Oh, sorry, Councillor Black's got his hand up. Do you know?
Yeah, sorry, just I think Liam's just muddied the water a bit there, because in relation to the access, he said if there is a complaint, we can go and look at it. But that seems to contradict what I've just been told about a formal process being required to sign off the access.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the wording of the condition, it doesn't actually require the submission of details. But what Ian had mentioned earlier is that they're going to have to provide details of access at reserve matters stage. If you read the condition, it says prior to the commencement of development of dwelling houses, the means of access shall be constructed and completed in accordance with the approved plans. So it's not requiring the applicant to submit to us an application, as far as I see it, the way it's drafted. But the application will be the reserve matters application in terms of the detail of the access.
So when a reserve matters application comes in, you will then go and check the access.
Well, they won't be building it at that time because they're going to be essentially this application is outlined with all matters reserved. So light design is reserved for future stages, so is access. But we've obviously dealt with the access now because they've given us indication that the details that is the access. So there isn't a requirement there, as far as I see it worded, that we have to discharge the condition, if you see what I mean. But there is a requirement on the applicant and the owner of the land, if they're going to take the scheme forward, to actually comply with that condition.
Well, is it possible to change the wording of the condition so that they do have to discharge it?
You can change the wording of it. I guess we've got to be asking ourselves what are we requiring them to put into us? Are we requiring a check-in mechanism, or are we, you know, are we almost saying because they've provided the details on the plan, you see, so they provided the plan details that show us the measurements of it. And
well, I think what I'm seeking is some certainty from the planning authority's point of view that a 4.5 metre access is provided all the way through, and that we are able to check that rather than relying on a system of complaints and follow-up, by which time it may be too late, they've started building, etc., and we then have to go down an enforcement route. So it just seems to me that by saying they have to discharge the condition, by which we can check it, that gives certainty to residents and to everybody else that this access is suitable.
Yeah, I can see the point. I mean, we wouldn't normally do it, but given the concerns, I see the point in terms of committee wanting to have that check-in procedure, so we can embed that within the condition if you see fit. We can tweak it so that they have to provide the details, construct it, and have almost like an inspection, essentially. But what we just need to be mindful of is that this is the outline plan permission, and the reserve matters application will have the details of the access, so we can, through that application, we could be requiring that detail to come forward further again, if you see. So,
okay. Well, as long as there is a process by which we can satisfy ourselves that the access is satisfactory before building commences, I'm happy, but I'd rather have an inspection rather than rely on plans.
Councillor Black,
if members look at condition 1 on the recommendation, that requires details of the access to be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. So, as part of the reserve matters application, details of that access will be provided. That condition needs to be read in conjunction with condition 11, which requires a minimum of 4.5 metres per its whole length. So the scheme submitted would have to show an access that has a minimum of 4.5 metres per its whole length. If that reserve matters application is approved, then they would have to comply with condition 11 to provide that access as approved at reserve matters stage before the dwelling houses are commenced. So the access would then go in at the minimum 4.5 metre width in accordance with an approval of a subsequent application.
And that would be inspected at that point.
It can be inspected. It's not normally a requirement. It's with all conditions, the requirement on compliance is with the developer. But if there are any concerns, officers, it's ensuring the development is undertaken in accordance with the planning permission, which is a two-stage process, outline and reserve matters.
Okay.
Not really, no.
Can we have the assurance that the reserved matters will come back to this committee?
It would be the same procedure to call in an application as any other application. So if it hits the thresholds for committee, it would come back to committee.
Yeah. Or as well, I know the other procedure then, Councillor. I got a few speakers here. Matthew, and then I have 3 members put their hands up again.
Yeah, thank you. I picked this application up when this came in. Obviously, I was aware that there was a previous consent on it, but that's before my time. And to be honest, when I first looked at it, my first thought was, even though it's an outline consent, is that there wasn't enough width on the access. I did raise it as a query, and the applicant has provided land reg plans, that kind of thing, to show that there was sufficient width to put a 4.5 metre access in within their title. So, I have to take what's been submitted at face value. And on that basis, provided that went in prior to building anything, then I couldn't really make an objection. Councillor Thomas raised the issue of the 6.5 metre widening. That's the drop curb, effectively. If you widen an access, then naturally you've got to pull the drop curb out to allow for the swing of a larger vehicle. Obviously, that requires agreement with the Highway Authority. So even outside of the reserve matters process, the applicant would require a highway agreement to do that, because you can't work on an adopted highway without our explicit agreement. You mentioned things like, where are we? Land ownership and the verge, Councillor. The Highway Authority doesn't own the highway. It has to maintain it. And there's a distinct difference there. So as an adjoining property, they've got the right to put an access in, subject to technical approval and our agreement. And as part of that, it would involve widening the drop curb, possibly moving a lighting column slightly, and hardening up any surfaces to make sure that if you start running over areas that have got surfaces in, that they're protected. The access as shown is a shared driveway at 4.5 metres. That would never be adopted highway. It's a private drive to be shared by the houses. It meets the required visibility displays for vehicles and pedestrians. So on that basis, I didn't really have an objection to make. Turning heads and large vehicles, although it is an outline application, they have provided indicative plans of what the internals could look like with some swept paths to show large vehicles entering and turning and exiting in a forward gear. So I don't have any concerns in that regard. Just say what else we had. We had Councillor Lewis concealed entrance signs. So once the access is widened and the drop curb is widened, the visibility is fine. It complies with the visibility requirements for peds and vehicles on that kind of road. So it technically wouldn't be a concealed entrance. It's just an entrance. So I didn't consider there was any need for any additional signage. But saying that, they still have to get through technical approval with the Highway Authority. So if at that stage we decided there was a potential visibility issue, we could always ask them to improve it or add some signs.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We've got a few hands up again now. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, Chair, I'm only coming back because I agree entirely with Peter Black, because the main concern that we've had of residents is the access. So by discharging condition 11, we are checking it, because otherwise, like you said before, if it's on the page, it's okay. But apparently that's not, that's not right for the people. They'd be happy, local members be happy if we go out, we discharge condition 11 and we make sure it's, because they're arguing that there's not a 4.5 metre, and once this is completed, then we will say yes, it's 4.5 metres, so everybody's happy. If it's not 4.5 metres, we don't discharge the condition, and we can't carry on. To me, it's simple.
Yeah,
obviously, it's not. Obviously, it's not.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Downing and Councillor Black entirely. I mean, it's an outline planning application, but at this very point, can Matthew Bauer or the highways be completely satisfied that it meets the public safety requirements? Now then, as it is at the moment, can you give me a guarantee that it meets all public safety requirements?
We'll come back to that then. Okay, Councillor. Councillor Des Thomas again. You there? Hand up.
Sorry, my hand isn't up, Chair.
All right. Okay. Right. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Phil Downing and Councillor Black, and also Councillor Evans. I do worry about the visibility of the safety exiting the site, but I also want reassurance today that no building work will start until we know 4.5 measured there.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Chairman.
Yes.
Can I come in on
Yes.
this one? Because this, I listened intently to the argument going forward on this one. I think we've been on this site visit some years ago, if I remember rightly. We had a site visit many years ago there. And I actually think that as far as I'm concerned, the access off the main road off Bishopston Common would be the answer, but unless that is the only one in, I think so. But I really feel that there are so many worries and contentions. I will be voting against this, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, there was a question for you there about the safety issue.
Well, from the information that's been provided, if that land is all within the applicant's title, then a compliant access can be provided. And that compliant access meets the visibility requirements for vehicles and pedestrians.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Was there anyone? Oh, Linda Tyler Lloyd, sorry.
can anybody tell me why it is that they have decided on this access and not the access on from the main road, which is what I said I've used for many years. I didn't even, I wouldn't have considered going another way, but I mean, there wasn't another way to go. But why is it that they have not abided by the entrance from the main road? Can you answer that for me?
It's not a planning concern, is it?
Yeah.
You always, I mean, when, okay, but I'll be voting against it because I think it's crazy.
Yeah, we're dealing with the application as it is in front of us now. Was there any else that wanted to come back with anything, or are we happy to?
I mean, it's already been said. I mean, we have to deal with the applications put before us, and the red line that's contained on that application, that tallies with the land registry document that we've seen from the applicant. So I'm not clear on the other access that's referred to. Even if that is the the lawful means of access to the site. At the end of the day, we have to deal with the application before us. So they propose this access. We don't explore whether that other access is coming forward at the moment. We have to deal with what's before us, and we did in 2015, and we approved this very same application. So we have to have mindful that have that in mind, that really that we hear again for the second time dealing with the same site and the same issue. That if the applicant doesn't own that land, then the site can't be developed. If they do own the land, then it can be developed in accordance with the plans. So we have to focus on the plans put before us. And as Matt has said, if as the plans are put forward, it complies with the highway requirements, then we have no reason to refuse it. Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Chair, can I pursue the amendment to condition 11? I'd like to see that made a dischargeable condition.
Is there someone to second that?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Yeah, okay. So members in favour of adding amendment?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Against?
Yeah.
Is there no one against?
Yeah.
Okay, right, okay. So as officers have said, already applications have been approved on this site. But after a very thorough discussion, and I thank you for that and all the responses, we can now move to the vote with that amendment proposed by Councillor Black and seconded.
Okay, Councillor Cyril Anderson.
4.
Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Councillor Phil Downing.
4.
Councillor Will Evans.
4.
Councillor Mary Jones.
4.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Councillor Richard Lewis.
Against.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
4.
Councillor Des Thomas.
4.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Mike White.
4.
And Chair. 4. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for and 2 against. Okay, that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you all. And then we move on to the next item 5, which is you see on page 135, which is Tenant at High Street. And that's back to you, Liam, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So this application is on the agenda as it's a major development that meets the threshold for referral to committee in the Council's constitution. In terms of updates, we didn't have any to report at the time of producing the update sheet yesterday. There's a couple of things just come to our attention. Firstly, there's one minor error in the report on page 152. In the placemaking and heritage consultation response to the application, in paragraph 2 of that page, they make reference to the increase in scale and height when viewed from vantage points near St Matthew's Church. And in there they say it's not considered acceptable in an urban context. But our understanding is this should actually read is considered acceptable in an urban context. So just to make that clear. Secondly, in the report, we've referred to drainage matters and have identified the scheme would require SAB approval. But then we've we've gone on to insert a condition number 15, setting out a requirement for a scheme to be submitted to the planning authority for approval. So given that this would duplicate what is already required through the SAB process, we propose to remove condition 15 from the application that's before you. So that's the update. In terms of the application site and the surroundings, you've got the red line there showing the application site. It's a parcel of land, 0.32 hectares, brownfield land, to north of Swansea train station. It's bordered to the west by Swansea High Street and to the north by Powell Street. And the south has a drop-off lay-by area for the train station. So the site's currently occupied by a large 6-storey tenant office building, use class B1, although large parts of the building have been vacant for a significant period of time. It's indicated the building is due to become fully vacant imminently, and a prior notification has already been approved in relation to its demolition. The Grade 2 listed building of St Matthew's Church is approximately 50 metres to the west of the site, so on the other side of High Street. And the Palace Theatre then is approximately 80 metres to the north, just off picture there. So as I say, the application is for a purpose-built student accommodation by way of redevelopment of Tenant. Development would involve the construction of 370 bed spaces within the building, ranging from 5 to 11 stories in height. Associated amenity space, landscaping, improvements to public realm, car parking, cycle parking will be provided as part of the application. If we go on to the next slide, then sort of gives us a context. So you can see just the context there. It's the red coloured image, the application site. You've got the train station immediately to the south. Pictured there, the applicant has put some relevant planning applications in, just for context. You can see the Mariner Street near the site, the Jockey Street scheme, as well as the Old Way Centre. So there are a few different schemes there, and then in blue is pictured the St David's student development there on the other side. So the building proposed, as I said, ranges up to 11 stories in height on the southwestern corner and 5 stories in height along the northern boundary. So if we move through to the next slide, so you've got Tenant there as it exists, and the next slide then shows the proposed scheme. So you can see the context and the articulation there on that corner with the tower on the corner and the areas dropping. The 370 bed spaces will consist of a mix of student accommodation within cluster flats and studios. The main pedestrian entrance reception area will be at that southwestern corner of the building from High Street, so similar to the current position. There'd be an area of outdoor amenity space, landscape courtyard to the rear of the building for students, and the building would accommodate a roof terrace on the northern part, again for the amenity space. Access and parking, so vehicle access is provided to 15 car parking bays on the service area from Powell Street. Servicing would take place from Powell Street with vehicles reversing into the site as per the existing situation. Additionally, there are a total of 190 secure cycle parking spaces within the lower ground floor area. And as with any other city centre purpose-built student developments, the scheme will create what is to be a largely car-free development in order to ensure students do not utilise the parking places without prior approval. A car parking management tenancy agreement would prevent students bringing a car to the site or parking in the site itself. In terms of landscaping, the scheme includes retention of trees along High Street. Just see them in your image, and planting of further trees to enhance the public realm together with sustainable drainage infrastructure. As I say, soft landscape will be introduced along the southern part of the building and green infrastructure on the roof. So if we just cycle through the images to get a feel for the design. So that's on High Street. If we go through. So you can see that's the existing building, and then if you cycle back through the images, you can just see the context there and how it reacts to the street scene. And the next couple of slides is a similar one there. That's off Powell Street, I think. Yeah. So you've got the context there. You can see the difference in articulation between the windows of the current building and the windows proposed with the ground floor being all glazed. So you've got that sort of street facing elevation. And the next few slides then just show the further aspects of the scheme. So you can see the parking bays there. So that's looking at from the rear of the site with High Street beyond. It indicates there the green roof. And if you go through, that's just showing the brick and the different colours of bricks that's going to be used on the building. And again, just the articulation of the ground floor there, the active frontage. This is the landscaping scheme for the site. So you can see the various tree planting. You've got the courtyard there behind. So you've got an amenity space for students to utilise. High Street's on the left of the image, and then you've got the amenity space behind. The last few slides then are just showing the ground floor arrangement. So again, you've got the parking spaces there, and then the upper floors then showing the cluster flats. So in terms of principle of development, it's within the Swansea central area, defined by policy SDJ, and adjacent to the railway station and other services in the city. The SCARF document identifies the area along High Street as being the High Street gateway, so it sets up some key design principles. And the key design principles ensuring active frontages in that area, bringing vitality to the street, reflecting the pattern of development there, increasing green space and promoting use of quality materials. Policies RC1 and H11 encourage the student-related developments within the central area. So essentially, we're looking to increase footfall into the city centre to improve vitality and viability. Another planning consideration in terms of principle of the use is the principle of loss of the existing office use. So policy PS4 and RC10 protect land and premises in active, viable employment use, such as B1 office use. RC11 sets out changes to non-business uses will only be permitted where it can be demonstrated the use is no longer viable or appropriate. It says need to retain the premises having regard to future demand. So the applicant has submitted a marketing report to address this issue. The office building has largely been vacant over recent years, especially since the relocation of HMRC to Cardiff. The report highlights the limited interest and concludes there is no need to retain the use to meet identified demand, and that speculative development or refurbishment of offices is not seen as the viable option to developers at this location. So, and it should also be acknowledged the planning authority has granted a prior approval of the demolition of the building. So given this, we feel the principle of development is acceptable. They have submitted some detail on student need assessment, which is in the report on page 160. Effectively, it's covering the potential future growth and suggests there is supporting evidence that despite COVID and the issues there, that the strong growth will continue. In terms of character, our placemaking and heritage team have given a full appraisal of this on pages 147 to 156. So they've referenced the tall buildings SPG, the requirement for tall buildings to be slender and elegant, not monolithic in appearance. So we have the stepping up from 5 to 11 stories, the main tower being on that southwest corner. The massing avoids an overbearing effect on High Street because it's stepped down the massing from that tower aspect. There's distinct breaking up of the facade, the articulation in massing. There's change in materials, fenestration design. So we feel it will act as a corner bookend tower, really sort of a marker element in the gateway in relation to Swansea train station. So as I say, the articulation there shown on one of the images, but samples and architectural detail would, as it always is, controlled by planning conditions. In terms of highway impacts, the parking standards SPG sets out that within all zones there's a need for 1 car parking space for every 25 bedrooms for servicing wardens and drop-off areas. The applicants propose 15 spaces, which would accord with the SPG. Section 106 is further proposed to deal with the management plan requirements for the parking area, tenancy agreements to control on-site parking, restricting the development to registered students only, as well as a financial contribution of £35,000 which would fund public realm works in the vicinity of the site. So talking about upgrading shared footways and cycleway connections. In this instance, there's no highway objections to report on the scheme. College and green infrastructure, you can see in the report reference there, the national, or the thrust of national policy at the moment is to provide for ecological enhancements through development and green infrastructure as much as possible. So as I say, the proposal proposes green roofs, rain gardens, biodiverse planting, and this can all be secured as it is in the report through planning conditions. So effectively, this scheme involves significant regeneration of the site. It aims to provide a contribution to the growing demand for purpose-built student accommodation. It is consistent with national planning policy, local development plan policy, and in encouraging regeneration of the city centre. So it's in a sustainable location. It offers off-site improvements to walking and cycling, and planning balance is fully in favour of the application. So on that note, I'll just pass you back to the Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Liam. And Chris wanted to address the stage for the application. Chris, you've got your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Chris Marsh. I'm from Pegasus Group, the applicant's planning consultants. It's appreciated this application obviously has the support of your professional officers and has not been subject to any objections from members of the public or your statutory consultees. However, given the importance of the application to the applicant, we would welcome this opportunity to speak. The applicant, as I'm sure you're aware, Watkin Jones Group, is a market-leading developer and operator with a proven track record in developing purpose-built managed student accommodation. Nationally, they have constructed over 43,000 managed student accommodation bedrooms to date across 135 student schemes, with an excellent track record for delivery. It's noteworthy that over 95% of its developments are on site within 6 months of the grant of planning permission. Recently in Swansea, they've of course delivered the St David's student development, which was built out in 3 separate phases and comprises 967 student bed spaces. The applicant is committed to the redevelopment of the application site, which it owns. Commencement of the development will start this autumn, and the development completed in summer 2023 in time for the start of the academic year. The proposals have gone under extensive pre-application consultation with the Council's officers and the Design Commission for Wales. During that pre-application phase, significant amendments were made to the scheme in response to comments and suggestions raised by the Council's planning and heritage officers. In this regard, we'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Council's officers for their consistently positive and communicative approach to this application throughout the course of discussions. This dialogue has helped shape the proposals to create an extremely high-quality, sustainable development that responds excellently to the site's context. This is reflected in your design and planning officers' comments within the report before you. The benefits of this proposal are numerous, and the proposal will contribute towards achieving sustainable development, resulting in economic, social and environmental benefits. The impacts of the proposals have been considered in detail by your professional officers and have been found to be acceptable in all aspects. Where other adverse impacts have been identified, these have been resolved and otherwise are minor and far outweighed by the significant public benefits associated with the scheme. The development will improve the visual appearance of the local area, providing a high quality and immediately recognisable development. It will also create active frontage through the raising of levels at the ground floor level, creating a vibrant relationship between the building and the street scene, and improving the vitality and viability of the location, as you've heard. For these reasons, it's hoped you will support the application in line with your officer's considered recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I got 3 hands up there. Councillor Black was first.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. I never thought I'd be thinking the current T9 is more attractive building than its successor, but I think I'm not actually enamoured by the way this one looks. I just wanted to make a comment really on the student needs assessment, which I gather from what Liam has said was provided to us as opposed to carried out by us. It just seems to me that this is a bit simplistic, but it doesn't take account at all of the number of students who actually live at home and go to these 2 universities. So in carrying out an assessment of future need of student accommodation, it does seem to me that you do need to take account of the large number of students who go to their home college and do so from their home, And also you need to take account, I think, of projections in terms of overseas students, many of whom can actually afford this sort of accommodation when a lot of homegrown students can't. So I'm just thinking that if we're going to have future applications for student accommodation, we really need a more sophisticated model on which we can assess the need for that, and maybe we should develop that ourselves rather than relying on one provided for us by the developer. That was just an observation I had after reading through this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Anders.
Thank you, Chair. It's only a comment that Liam made. You know, we're going into the 21st century now. Having heavy goods vehicles reversing into the site once it's built, you know, I would have thought it's going to be a lovely, wow, new building, but access to drive in and drive back out with a turning circle inside.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Councillor Black has said one of my things, but I have some others. About the glazing in the windows as it's so close to the train station. If I remember correctly, when St David's student accommodation was going to be built, we took a long time talking about it, and it was the rooms that would be adjacent to the railway tracks. I almost said we asked for something like triple glazing. I can't find anything in this report, and I'm sure somebody will probably remember better than I will, but I know it was definitely not single glazing. The next one is page 161, and Liam has made mention of it, about the adaptability, but it only says about a hotel. But we have, you know, a need for one-bedroom apartment for our young people, excuse me, not students. And I'm wondering how adaptable it could be if we didn't have the student need. And the third one is about the parking and disabled spaces. There's nothing to say about the disabled spaces that are on that site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in regards again to the tenancy agreement with students here, you know, in the parking, my concern clearly, Watkin Jones haven't got the best track record in imposing the condition on the take-up of the students, but I would just ask that the agent takes that point back to Watkin Jones, because clearly, you know, there have been serious concerns with them in the past with other developments within that area of concern on New Cut Road. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's safe to say that the committee is underwhelmed by the proposed design of this building. It looks very similar to those currently on the Singleton campus, which were built in the 1960s, just boxes and added together. I would have thought we could have come up with something a bit better these days, especially at the entrance to the city there. You come out of the train station and you know, you need to see something significant, if I can put it that way. Yeah, okay, I can't see us refusing it, but it doesn't excite the committee, does it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Got no other hands up. Two legacy hands up, I think, Councillor White and Thomas. Where are we? Liam, and did you want to come back with anything?
I think Liam have left, Chair.
All right. Dropped out, is he? Okay. Are there any other responses? As Liam was Matthew going to have them.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Councillor Jones mentioned disabled spaces. The SPG would require 6% of the total to be disabled, and there is sufficient space in the parking area to mark them out to the correct size. So there's no issue with that regard. Councillor Anderson mentioned refuse lorries. We did have a bit of toing and froing with the applicant about their refuse strategy. It was felt that Powell Street was quiet enough to allow a vehicle to reverse in to pick the bins up. There were no objections from waste management about that method either. And I think that was it. unless I'm mistaken.
Thank you, Matthew. Perhaps
yeah, I think just to come in relation to the point raised by Councillor Jones on noise assessment, there was a noise migration assessment submitted as part of the application. Condition 17 requires the works to be undertaken in accordance with the recommendations of that assessment, and it limits the amount of noise that should be experienced within the room. So it was part of the application, has been assessed as part of the application.
All right, so no other hands up there? No. Okay, well, if that's the case, then members, you see the recommendation there is
about adaptability on page 161, where it said it's only of the hotel, and I asked about if young people could have them as studio apartments, if our young people, non-students, would be able to have them adapted so they could live in them. Thank you.
Sorry, but I'll start as the other seems to have dropped out. I mean, when you have purpose-built student accommodation, the standard of amenity space generally isn't sufficient for permanent accommodation. So in terms of adaptability, it's unusual for a student-built block to be able to be adapted to permanent accommodation for, I think you mentioned, single people. So I think we have looked at it, but I don't think the amenity spaces provided with this proposal would be sufficient for permanent homes.
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you, but you do mention a hotel in that paragraph about, it could be adapted for a hotel, and that's why I wondered why we couldn't have it adapted to the block itself, not just one room, the whole thing, perhaps adapted for our young people that would want accommodation.
I think potentially there could be significant alterations to provide amendments, but in terms of simple adaptations, there wouldn't be the amenity space for permanent accommodation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, as I was saying, the recommendation there is one of approval, you've seen on page 173, and again, now we will proceed to vote.
Councillor Cyril Anderson.
For.
Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Councillor Phil Cunning.
For.
Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Mary Jones.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Richard Lewis. Councillor Richard Lewis.
Muted, Richard.
In favour, Chairman.
Okay, in favour, thank you. Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Des Thomas.
For.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Mike White.
For.
And Chair. For. There we are, that's all in favour and that's approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then moving on to item 6, there is 41 Woodfield Street. Andrew,
yes. Thank you, Chair. Again, you can do a presentation on this one. If you can go to the site location plan, thank you. So this application is for the change of use from Class A1 retail shop to a cafe takeaway Class A3 at 41 Woodfield Street. I would like to refer members to the update sheet. There have been comments from pollution control which are clarified on the sheet. The applicant has confirmed that they don't need extraction and we accept that. If pollution control determined they did, then firstly they need planning permission for that, and pollution control have powers to make sure that they can put the appropriate extraction in. In terms of just on the update sheet as well, we have had a letter from the applicant just clarifying the situation as he sees it. In terms of this application has been determined by committee for decision as it is considered to be a departure application from the development plan. The application site is a split level property located on the southern end of Woodfield Street in Morriston, identified in red on the property on the plan. The property is located in a row of 4 similar units to the north of Wilco's, which is the large building in the bottom right-hand corner of the plan on the left-hand side, with the tabernacle located just to the south, as shown in the Google Maps aerial view on the right-hand side of the page. You'll note that the property has rear access from Slate Street, which runs to the north of the site. Now, if you can go to the next screenshot, please, Ian. So this is a Google Street View of the premises. The top left is a view of the front of the site. So the application site is the former Buttons premises with a roller shutter located between what was Ramsden's, that's now vacant as well, and a tanning salon. As you'll note, there's a wide pavement in front with vehicle lay-by, and further up there's a taxi rank just to the right-hand side of the screen. In the bottom right-hand corner is a rear view of the property, which is 2-storey at the rear, as I said before, and does have access from Slate Street. And then the bottom left is just a view south along Woodfield Street, and you can see the Tabernacle spire above the trees and other commercial properties in the vicinity. If you can go to the layout, next one, please. Thank you, Ian. So on the left-hand side is the ground floor, so that's ground floor from Woodfield Street, and on the right-hand side is the basement level. So there are no external changes proposed to the property itself as part of this application. The layout shows a servery area taken at the middle section of the shop with a toilet and stairs at the rear and a seating area at the front. Outdoor seating is also shown on the frontage, but highways consent would be required for this. It doesn't form part of this application as it's outside of the application site. The basement level would be used for storage and as an office. In terms of consultation responses, there have been no objections to the proposal. It's considered to be a departure as no evidence of marketing for 12 months has been provided. In terms of consultees, there have been no objection from any consultees, and the comments of the strategic planning and placemaking team are of relevance. The proposed use would operate from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 p.m, selling sandwiches and cakes. And in terms of the proposal, it's not considered to result in a concentration of 3 or more non-A1 uses. And obviously, you do have the large Wilco store in close proximity. So policies RC5 and RC9 are relevant, and whilst it's not traditional retail, national and local plan policy notes the importance of other complementary uses in centres to help aid vibrancy and attractiveness, and there are positives associated with bringing an empty unit back into occupation. And as I said, at the present time, as a result of COVID, demand for retail uses is considered to be low. So this is an on-balance decision, but on balance, it is considered that the proposal would have benefits that make the application acceptable despite not being marketed for the requisite period at the current time. And the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. No hands up. Any member wish to speak there? No? No, sure. Okay then. Well, in that case, you see the recommendation again is one of approval. I would take a vote on that now then.
Councillor Cyril
For.
Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Councillor Phil Downing.
For.
Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Mary Jones.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis. Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Richard Lewis.
For, Chairman.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Des Thomas.
For.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Mike White.
For.
And Chair.
Yeah, for.
That's all in favour. That's approved, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then our final item, you see item 7 is the former Pines Club. And you see the starts at page 195. And Andrew, that's yours again, is it?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Chair. So this application is for the modification of a Section 106 agreement dated the 5th of March originally, linked to the development of the former Pines, and subsequent amendment to the Section 106 dated the 26th of February in 2021. to allow for 690 to remain and 688 to remain as individual residential units. So there is an update on this one in terms that the appellant has appealed non-determination. The authority doesn't consider he can do this, as noted in the report, and we have written to the Planning Inspectorate to set out why we don't consider this to be the case. But in any event, members do have jurisdiction at the present time to make a decision today. So in terms of the site location plan, this application, this application is being reported to committee as it seeks a variation of the Section 106 agreement attached to an application that was previously determined at committee. So planning permission was granted in 2018 for the mixed-use development comprising 28 residential dwellings and 2 commercial units in Class A1, subject to a Section 106 agreement. So the area in red is the previous application site, and that is currently under construction. The area in blue on the plan is number 690, which is subject of this application. And you'll note the offset nature of not just this garden, but the row of properties. So the garden is in the blue, between the blue and the red line, as originally proposed or in before the previous application. So Section 106 agreement originally sought to require the cessation of the residential use of number 690 Llangyfarch Road prior to the commencement of development and its demolition prior to the first occupation of any of the units, as the development was considered to have an overbearing effect on their garden area specifically. The neighbours living at number 688 inquired about purchasing the dwelling to enable them to extend their property into this unit, and the Section 106 was varied at committee in November 2020. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Ian. This is just a slide showing the layout, basically. So you can see 690 is shown hatched there, which is the property to be demolished. The building closest to it is 4 stories. You can see how close it is to the boundary. So this was proposed as a landscaping scheme as part of the original development. If you go to the next slide, please, Ian. This is basically an aerial site photo from Google. So it's a view of the relationship between 690, which is the white property shown, and the building when it was under construction. So it's currently at a higher level than this, which I'll show you next. Number 688, who bought the property next door, is in brown spar-render. So if you can go to the next screen, please, Ian. You will see this is, again, an aerial view from Google of the 4-storey building built at a higher level in close proximity to what was the garden area of 690. This garden area is within the development footprint indicated due to the offset nature of it, and the dwelling was originally intended to be demolished because of the overbearing impact of the development on the garden area. So as you'll see there, the garden area of 690 is within the development site. When it was previously amended, it was requested to be used as an extension of number 688. The issue of the garden would not remain because number 688 garden is the last one in green before the application site. So if you can flick to the next screen, please, Ian. This next plan just clarifies the situation when members considered it previously. So you'll note the previous layout plan submitted. The garden area of 688 was behind 690. So therefore, we considered, or members considered at the time, joining those 2 houses together still acceptable because the development didn't have an overbearing impact on the garden of 688. So because this is an amendment to a Section 106 agreement, there have been no public consultations undertaken, but as set out in the report, the authority has to consider the 4 tests that's set out in case law. So firstly, it was considered that the development would have a harmful impact on the occupiers of number 690 due to the overall mass of the development in close proximity to the garden boundary. The amended Section 106 agreement still ensures that the development does not impact on the garden for 690 for the reasons I've just explained. The applicant argues that due to this amendment, the original concerns are no longer relevant. However, that's not the case, and the garden area of 688 would have been used for both properties.
So the proposed modification to retain 690 as a separate dwelling would not equally serve the same purpose, as this is what the original agreement and subsequent agreement sought to overcome. So the restrictions and requirements within Section 106 do currently serve a useful purpose, and the Section 106 should therefore not be amended. So the recommendation is to refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And we do have the one of the local members on the committee. Anyway, so Councillor Lewis, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Many of the members of the committee came to the site, and we had a site survey there back in 2017, and we walked the site. And I must say that I was very, very in favour of this development going ahead, and it has been a resounding success with much needed social housing and a very, very excellent Tesco small store there and a bakery, which has really enhanced the area, and people who are living close can now get access to a shop just by walking or cycling, whereas previously you had to get in the car to get some food or drink. But going back to the original application, I was quite happy to put my name to it, providing that the area that is in dispute, 690, was demolished and left as a green wedge and a small area where it would give a complete break from a big housing development back to small terrace of houses. I still am of that opinion, and going back to 2007, I question whether I would have voted for that application to go ahead if what we now have before us was put before us then. So I am completely in tune with the officers on this one, and I would personally seek to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Councillor Mary Jones.
Yeah, can Andrew go back and put the site photo up where I think it was the last one, which showed the 690 and 688's garden behind 690, because it was so confusing. That's the one. It's so confusing. I mean, I was on the original site visit, and I was actually contemplating, I don't want to go against the local member, asking for another site visit, because it's so difficult for us to visualise. I know the local member lives in that proximity to it. But 688, how do they access the garden into 690? I can see where your arrow is. Does it go just right behind the house and across there? So they actually would have better access if they could get out to 690. And if what I understand is they want to buy 690, is that what the what you said, Andrew? Because I'm so confused about it now. I'm not going against the local member. I just want some clarification of what exactly 688 want at the end of the day, not the actual development. I'm just seeing what the actual residents want.
Okay, 688. So as I said, number 690, which is the property in red there, was bought by Coastal as part of the development originally, going back. So they own the red hatched garden as well, which, as I said, at the time of the application, officers raised concerns with regards to the proximity of the 4-storey building in close proximity to that garden. It was going to be overbearing and have an unacceptable impact. Coastal accepted that and said, well, do you know what? We'll buy the property, we'll demolish number 690, and we'll use the area at the rear for landscaping. So that was what was originally proposed as part of the first application that came to members. When sometime last year, the owners of number 688 queried whether they could buy the property 690, so just the dwelling itself. And what they said was, well, we've got our garden at the rear of that property, which is the yellow garden. So you can save knocking the property down. We can extend the house for sustainability reasons. It's better to keep it. But the amenity issues are overcome because suddenly 688, which we considered the impact on the garden was to be fine, remains the same. What the applicant has done now, so I believe it's the owners of 688, I think off the top of my head, but what they're trying to do is say, well, rather than do that, we will keep 688 as it was with just the yellow for that property, and 690 will have what is effectively in the hatched area in red. So when we're considering this, we're looking at, is the original planning purpose still the same? It is. We still have concerns about the impact on the garden of the red hatched property. And if we were to allow this, and as I said, we don't have to, because as I said, it's not, the modification doesn't equally serve the same purpose. So this is why we're saying it's unacceptable.
Okay.
Thank you. I think I've got there now.
Thank you. No, I understand. I've got no other hands up to speak. Nope. Okay, thank you. Well, if that's the case, then you see the recommendation there is one of refusal, and we will now take a vote on that recommendation.
Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Refuse.
Councillor Peter Black.
Refuse.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Refuse.
Councillor Will Evans.
Refuse.
Councillor Mary Jones.
Refuse.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
Refuse.
Councillor Richard Lewis. Councillor Richard Lewis. No. Councillor Paulette Smith.
Refuse.
Councillor Des Thomas.
Yes, refuse, Chair.
Councillor Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Refuse.
Councillor Mike White.
Refuse.
And Chair.
Yeah, to refuse.
Okay, that's all present in favour of refusal.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our business for today. Thank you so much. And then we meet again on the 6th of September. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.